CM Punk and Roman Reigns just formed a new alliance, and together shook the entire WWE universe. Last night on Raw, the impossible happened. Roman Reigns returned out of nowhere, looking like he hadn't missed a step, and brought backup no one saw coming, CM Punk. Together, they walked straight into Paul Heyman's little empire and tore it down like it was a backyard tent. The crowd lost it. The commentary team lost it. Heyman? He completely lost it. His faction got smoked in seconds. One by one. Like an exorcism in real time. And when it was over, the wise man was on the mat, hands together, begging Roman for mercy. Literally pleading with the same man he once called his tribal chief. This wasn't a reunion. It was an execution. Roman's back. Punk's pissed. And Heyman? He should have seen this coming. That's not hyperbole. That's not hype. That's not WWE's marketing machine doing its usual job. That's the only way to describe what went down. The night started like any other post-PPV Raw. Commentary ran down the matches. Cameras cut backstage to Paul Heyman holding court like a mob boss, surrounded by his smug, overconfident faction, faces fresh from victory, laughing too loud, playing to the cameras. They thought they owned the night. They thought they owned the show. They didn't know they were about to get executed. No build-up. No teaser package. No leaked spoilers. Just one sudden, seismic shift. Roman Reigns' music hit. Not the head of the table version. Not the grandiose, championship-crowned intro we've grown used to. This was stripped down. Raw. Mean. The beat dropped, and the arena detonated. Every single person in that crowd shot to their feet like they'd been electrocuted. Roman Reigns was back. And he didn't come alone. That's what blew the roof off. That's what no one, not fans, not commentators, not even Heyman himself, was ready for. CM Punk. Yes. CM Punk. The man who had been snubbed, sidelined, and repeatedly disrespected. The same guy who had been teasing rage and betrayal for weeks without payoff. Last night, he cashed in. Not for a belt. Not for a title. For blood. Together, these two storms walked side by side down that ramp, and walked straight into Paul Heyman's empire. They didn't knock. They didn't announce themselves. They didn't even blink. They wrecked it. And the fans? They lost their minds. Commentary? Stammering. Shouting. Caught between disbelief and sheer awe. And Paul Heyman? He was stunned. Frozen. Watching his hand-picked killers, his enforcers, his heirs to the bloodline, get turned into corpses in real time. Let's get one thing clear. This wasn't Roman Reigns making a surprise return to challenge for gold. This wasn't CM Punk finally getting revenge on a personal rival. This was a targeted, precision-level demolition of everything Paul Heyman has built in the last 6 months. Piece by piece. Man by man. Reputation by reputation. And when the dust settled? When the last body hit the mat? Paul Heyman, the wise man, the architect, the kingmaker, was on the floor. Hands together. Pleading. Begging the same man he once called his tribal chief for mercy. This wasn't a promo. This wasn't scripted emotion. This was a reckoning. You could feel the fear pouring off him like sweat. Roman Reigns didn't say a word. Neither did Punk. They didn't have to. Their message was already written. Written in bruises. In silence. In the absence of mercy. They had come, not to talk, but to end something. And they did. To really feel the impact of what happened, we have to rewind, not days, not weeks, but months. Let's talk about Paul Heyman. For over a year now, he's been playing chess with everyone on the WWE roster. managing factions, sowing alliances, whispering in ears. Building a second-generation bloodline without ever calling it that. All while the real tribal chief was away. He'd gathered killers. Guys who crushed mid-carders and main eventers alike. They weren't superstars. They were assassins with theme music. Commentary kept calling them Heyman's new empire. But it wasn't new. It was a patchwork legacy made from betrayal and backstage manipulation. And for a while, it worked. Reigns' absence gave Heyman time to build. CM Punk's simmering anger was redirected. The locker room fell in line. Even fans began to forget what dominance used to really look like. But Roman Reigns didn't forget. And CM Punk didn't forgive. Somewhere, somehow, the two most dangerous men in wrestling decided that Paul Heyman was done writing their stories. And so they showed up to erase him from his own. Here's where this night cements itself as one of the greatest Raw moments in recent memory. When Roman walked out, the camera couldn't keep up. Fans were in shock, then roaring, then completely unhinged. People weren't just cheering, they were losing it. Phones were shaking in people's hands. Security guards on the ramp couldn't stop grinning. This wasn't just a surprise return. It was a moment. And when CM Punk emerged? It felt like a dimension had cracked. This wasn't about heel or face. This was something beyond alignment, beyond storylines. Two forces of nature had merged. And the entire crowd knew they were witnessing something legendary. Signs were ripped. Hats thrown. Tears were shed. Chants echoed that couldn't even be heard over the roar of disbelief. This wasn't wrestling. This was rebellion. So how did this happen? When did this alliance form? That's what everyone's asking right now. Some fans are speculating that this goes back months. That CM Punk's backstage frustrations weren't just a work, they were a slow-burn partnership forming under WWE's radar. Others think this was a nuclear reaction to Paul Heyman's manipulation finally going too far. Either way, the signs were there. If you go back and watch the last few Raws closely, you'll catch the moments. The looks. The pauses. The tension just off camera. Maybe they were never enemies. Maybe they were always inevitable. That's the most repeated line in every thread, every subreddit, every reaction video today. And it's true. Paul Heyman is a genius. But last night, he looked mortal. Vulnerable. Small. For years, he played the game better than anyone. He used his voice as a weapon. He negotiated factions into power and whispered legends into existence. But he made one fatal mistake. He thought he could write history without consulting the men who lived it. Roman Reigns and CM Punk were never tools in his belt. They were giants he couldn't measure. And when they finally returned to his doorstep? They didn't ask for answers. They brought war. WWE is no stranger to returns, betrayals, or shocking alliances. It's what makes sports entertainment entertainment. But this moment, this single night, was different. It wasn't about titles. It wasn't about egos. It was about legacy. Roman Reigns came back, not to reclaim something, but to destroy something false. CM Punk didn't walk out to save face, but to finish a grudge buried under years of silence. They weren't there to wrestle. They were there to end a lie. And Paul Heyman? He became the lie's final victim. We're going deep into everything that made this moment historic. We're breaking it down. The step-by-step sequence of Roman and Punk's ambush. Every reaction shot you might have missed from backstage, ringside, and in the commentary booth. Every faction member's fall, documented in brutal, moment-to-moment detail. The psychology behind why Roman chose this exact moment to return. Punk's motivations, both spoken and unspoken. And most importantly, what this means for the future of WWE. You're about to see Paul Heyman's empire collapse in slow motion. You're going to watch the greatest return of the decade unfold frame by frame. And by the end, you'll understand why everyone, from fans to legends, is calling this the execution, not the reunion. There are returns in wrestling, and then there are moments that split time in half. Roman Reigns didn't return to reclaim a crown. He returned like a man who had never lost it. Not in storyline. Not in perception. Not in power. The arena was halfway through a segment no one would remember. Commentary was hitting their usual notes. Then, everything paused. The lights dimmed. The bass line hit. Roman's music played, but not the version people were used to. It was stripped, minimal, primal. Like the entrance of a warlord, not a performer. It didn't say star. It said force. In that split second, everything shifted. The camera didn't cut away. Production didn't do its usual sweep. For the first few seconds, all we saw was the crowd losing their minds in real time. Hands flying up. Mouths wide open. Shock. The kind of honest, visceral disbelief that can't be scripted. Then Roman emerged. He didn't stop to soak it in. He didn't pose. No pyrotechnics. No pageantry. Just that look. Eyes cold. Shoulders squared. Like he had a job to do, and he wasn't planning on leaving until it was done. The commentary team didn't have a plan for this. Their voices stumbled. They tried to keep up, tried to spin it. Is that? No way, that's Roman Reigns. He's back. The tribal chief is here. But this Roman wasn't looking for acknowledgement. He was looking for someone. He walked to the ring without breaking stride. Fans reached out. He didn't look. His eyes were locked on the ring, where Paul Heyman stood, frozen, hand halfway to his ear, like he couldn't believe the music was real. Heyman had spent months building a faction, a storyline, a world where Roman didn't exist anymore. He was the architect now. The voice. The strategist behind the muscle. The tribal chief was old news. But old news had just walked through the door and brought an entirely new problem with him. Because Roman stopped halfway down the ramp. And then something no one expected happened. No one. Not the fans. Not the commentary team. Not even Heyman, who had seen every turn in every story before it happened, until now. CM Punk stepped out from the crowd. No music. No warning. Just a sudden camera shift to the barricade, where he hopped it like he belonged there. The crowd went nuclear. There was no way to prep for that moment. CM Punk, the most volatile, unpredictable, deeply polarizing figure in modern wrestling, was walking side by side with Roman Reigns. No nod between them. No handshake. No eye contact. Just motion. They walked together toward the ring, and in that moment, the crowd knew, this wasn't a tease. This wasn't a run-in. This was an alliance. Punk didn't wear a shirt with logos or gimmicks. He was in black. Plain black. Like someone dressed for a funeral. Heyman's funeral. The cameras cut to Heyman again, and he was no longer frozen. He was backing away. Not fast. Not in a cartoonish panic. But slowly. Deliberately. Like someone calculating how far he could get before they reached him. The two men hit the apron and entered. Heyman tried to speak. But his voice cracked. There was no mic needed. The silence was louder than any promo. He looked from Roman to Punk. Back to Roman. His mouth opened, and for once, nothing came out. This was a man who had spent decades using words to survive. To manipulate. To control. But there was no speech for this. There was only fear. The first strike didn't come from Roman. It came from Punk. Quick. Brutal. A forearm to one of Heyman's enforcers stepping between them. Another followed. Then Roman moved, quick, efficient destruction. A spear that cut through the next body like a blade through fog. It wasn't a match. There was no bell. No official. No rules. This was a dismantling. Each member of Heyman's faction stepped up like they were supposed to. And each one was taken down with surgical precision. Roman didn't speak. He didn't even look at Heyman. He moved like a man with a checklist. One by one, checking off names. Punk followed suit. Vicious. Focused. This wasn't the CM Punk of bitter promos and backstage drama. This was the Punk that fans feared and respected, a Punk with nothing left to lose and someone finally worth standing beside. The commentary team stopped trying to narrate. You could hear the shock in their silence. The crowd, at one point, fell into a strange rhythm. Cheers followed by a weird hush. Like they were watching something historical, something they didn't want to interrupt. Then it happened. Heyman fell. He wasn't hit. No one touched him. His legs gave out on their own. He dropped to his knees, hands clasped together, face twisted in pure disbelief and terror. Roman, he mouthed, loud enough to be caught on every camera in the arena. Please. It wasn't a promo. It wasn't theater. It was real. This wasn't entertainment. This was collapse. Roman stood above him. Not angry. Not vengeful. Empty. He looked down at the man who once stood beside him as his wise man, his protector, his advocate. And he didn't speak. Punk leaned in. Said something no mic caught. We'll break down what it could have been later. Then they turned. Left Heyman on the mat. No music played as they walked out. Just silence and scattered echoes of chants that hadn't yet found their rhythm. They didn't stay for cheers. They didn't stay for a message. They had delivered it. And it was heard loud and clear. This was not the return of Roman Reigns. This was the removal of Paul Heyman. The crowd didn't move for minutes. People stood, stunned. Phones were out. Faces were caught between celebration and confusion. Because now, the questions begin. Why did Roman come back now? Why Punk? Why together? Was this planned for weeks? Or did something happen behind the scenes we haven't seen yet? And the biggest question of all, what happens next? Because with Heyman's empire in ruins, with his faction destroyed, and with the two most dangerous men in wrestling now aligned, Raw is no longer just a show. It's a battlefield. And no one's safe. The ring wasn't a ring anymore. It was a wreckage site. The kind of mess you don't clean up. You just tape it off and let the world walk past slowly, in silence, trying to understand what they just witnessed. After Roman and Punk stepped out, no music played. There was no victory pose. No raised arms. No slogans. Just heavy breathing, broken bodies, and Paul Heyman still on his knees. Security didn't rush the ring. Referees didn't check on the fallen. Because what had just happened wasn't an angle. It was an ending. Let's break it down. Every second. Every takedown. Every moment of silence that landed louder than any pop. Because this wasn't just a beatdown. It was a message. A systematic, measured destruction of everything Paul Heyman had built since Roman left the throne. And it started with the weakest link. Who was in Heyman's faction? To understand the impact, we need to understand the structure. Heyman had spent the better part of 6 months creating a group that didn't just echo the bloodline, it tried to surpass it. He didn't want loyal followers. He wanted believers. The faction, though never officially named, had become known among fans as the Council. A team built around precision violence and psychological dominance. There were 4 core members. First, J.D. Riot. A lean, mean striker with an MMA background. Cold. Efficient. He had been Heyman's enforcer for 2 months. Unbeaten in singles matches since his debut. Second, Marcus Vane. The heavyweight. 6'6", 295 pounds. Brought in from NXT as the next Solo Sikoa, though less controlled and more brutal. Third, Kai Silva. The technician. Submission specialist. Master of the unexpected tap-out. Quiet. Methodical. Dangerous in silence. Fourth, Malachi Rise. The wild card. High flyer. Former tag team champion turned rogue. Heyman's personal project. His golden boy. The one everyone expected to carry the faction into championship territory. They weren't champions, yet, but they were dominant. Week after week, they dismantled opponents. Always under Heyman's cold instruction. Always without emotion. But last night, they weren't dominant. They were demolished. The second Punk slid under the ropes, JD Riot stepped in. Fast. Brave. Or maybe just stupid. He came swinging. Hard fists. That fighter's confidence in every step. Punk didn't even raise his hands to block. He ducked. One clean knee to the ribs. Then a spinning back elbow. JD folded. He didn't go down from a finisher. He didn't get choked out. He dropped like someone unplugged his soul. Punk didn't taunt. Didn't even look back. He moved on. Roman stepped over JD's body like it wasn't even there. And just like that, the enforcer was erased. Marcus Vane didn't wait. He charged. 2 steps into the ring, and he hit Roman's shoulder first. Roman didn't budge. The crowd gasped. You could feel the collision in your chest. Then Roman struck. A headbutt. A clothesline. Another. Vane stayed on his feet. This was a fight. They traded blows. Heavy. Loud. Pure weight. Like 2 buildings slamming into each other. But Roman was sharper. More precise. Less wasted motion. It ended with a Superman punch. 1. 2. Then the spear. Vane's back arched, his body flipped. And the ring felt 2 inches smaller. The heavy hitter was done. Not just knocked out, humbled. Roman turned his back on him like a broken toy. No drama. Just facts. Kai tried to run strategy. He backed away. Circled. Tried to bait Punk into a ground game. Punk didn't bite. He waited. Let Kai shoot. Countered it. Twisted it. Turned it into a knee bar so fast the crowd didn't even understand what they were seeing. Kai screamed. Not in pain, in panic. He rolled. Punk adjusted. Roman walked up, crouched beside them, and whispered something in Kai's ear. The submission didn't end with a tap. It ended with a blackout. Kai passed out in the hold. Eyes rolled back. Arms limp. Medical staff would later confirm no serious injury. But the message was loud: technique can't save you when vengeance is this personal. Malachi didn't fight at first. He watched. Stood on the outside of the ring, hands on the apron, calculating. When it was just him left, Roman and Punk turned to him slowly. That's when he jumped. Springboard. Top rope crossbody. High risk. High reward. Until Roman caught him midair. Not just caught him, stopped him. Turned. Slammed him into the mat so hard it echoed. Malachi got up. Somehow. Tried again. Super kick from Punk. Then a GTS. Then a spear. Not in sequence. Together. Like they'd rehearsed it. Like they knew. And that's when the crowd changed. They weren't just watching violence. They were watching choreography. Not just pain, poetry. Malachi didn't get back up. Heyman was alone. He had backed into the far turnbuckle by then. Hands trembling. Microphone forgotten on the mat. He looked at Roman. Then at Punk. Then back at Roman. No, he said. No crowd noise could drown it out. No, his voice cracked. His knees dropped. He brought his hands together. Like prayer. Or maybe habit. This wasn't acting. This was Paul Heyman, the man who'd manipulated champions, architects of eras, godfathers of stables, looking up at the man he helped create, and begging for mercy. The crowd didn't chant. They didn't cheer. They held their breath. Roman walked forward. Punk stood still. Heyman tried again. Please, Roman stared down. And then did something worse than attack. He turned around. Walked away. Left Heyman on his knees, still begging for something that wouldn't come. No script could prepare them. Corey Graves was silent. Michael Cole whispered, this wasn't supposed to happen. No catchphrases. No what a moment. No hype. Just reality. They couldn't hide it. This wasn't the finish to a match. This was the death of a story. People stayed after the cameras cut. They didn't leave. They stood in the aisles. Sat in their chairs. Waiting for something else to happen. But nothing did. That was it. That's what made it perfect. Roman and Punk had walked in, leveled a kingdom, and left nothing but silence. No pose. No music. No mic drop. Just the sound of a faction ending. A legend begging. And two giants walking out together. Not partners. Not friends. Allies. And that's more terrifying than anything else. After the destruction, there was no celebration. No fireworks. No grand announcement that the landscape had changed. But that's what made it hit even harder. Roman Reigns and CM Punk didn't just dismantle a faction. They didn't just bury Paul Heyman's power structure. They declared war on WWE's entire hierarchy. Without ever saying a word. What's more dangerous than two of the most iconic, controversial, dominant forces in wrestling joining sides? Two of them doing it quietly. Let's break down what this alliance means. Not just for Heyman. Not just for Raw. But for the entire company. The line came not from Roman or Punk, but from commentary, right after the cameras had cut and a leaked off-air mic caught a producer whispering, "This is not a reunion. This is a takeover." That phrasing spread like wildfire. Twitter. Reddit. Group chats. Fan pages. Because it was perfect. This wasn't nostalgia. It wasn't the return of old icons for one more run. This was strategic. Violent. A restructuring of power. Reigns and Punk weren't showing up to reclaim the past. They were showing up to destroy the present. On their own, each man is a system disruptor. Roman Reigns spent over 3 years redefining dominance, turning heel in a way no one saw coming, reshaping the idea of a champion, and building an empire from silence, fear, and brutal efficiency. CM Punk was never interested in being liked. He was about truth. Calling out corruption. Tearing down facades and forcing the company to look at its own reflection, and shatter it. Now? They're not feuding. They're not trading pipe bombs. They're walking the same path. Together. It's not about belts. It's about control. It's not about storylines. It's about consequences. When news of the destruction spread backstage, reactions were immediate and telling. Some stars reportedly left the arena early. Others refused to comment. One unnamed superstar said, "If those two are really together, then the main event scene just imploded." Producers were reportedly scrambling to rework upcoming match cards. Planned pushes, hinted rivalries, all on pause. Because now, no one knows what happens next. Do Reigns and Punk appear on both shows? Do they target only Heyman-related figures? Or is this just the beginning of a larger purge? Whatever the plan, one thing is clear, this is not just a team-up. This is a cold, strategic disruption of power. The most complicated man in wrestling made the simplest move. He burned the bridge behind him and walked forward with a man he once hated. Punk's motivations have always been layered. But this one might be the most clear-cut moment in years. He's done being played. Done being teased. Done being sidelined while others get crowned off his name. Heyman was supposed to be different. Their history ran deep. The respect, the mentorship, the belief. But Heyman sold out. Again. He built a new empire without him. And Punk responded like he always does, by dropping a grenade in the foundation. Roman didn't come back for a belt. He came back because he saw the throne being filled with pretenders. Heyman wasn't just keeping the seat warm. He was remodeling the whole castle in his name. And Roman watched. Waited. Calculated. Then returned to remind the world that the kingdom never belonged to Heyman. It belonged to the man who bled for it. Roman didn't attack out of rage. He dismantled out of purpose. He showed up with no pyro, no crown, no ceremonial entrance. He showed up like a man reclaiming his legacy by erasing a false one. Reigns is no longer aligned with the bloodline. Punk is no longer a solo rebel. Together, they represent the scariest thing in WWE, unified chaos. Everyone with a title is nervous. Everyone with a storyline is vulnerable. Because these two don't operate inside storylines. They create them. And destroy them. With no warning. You could feel it online before Raw even ended. Trending worldwide within 90 seconds. Hashtag Roman and Punk, hashtag Heyman destroyed, hashtag RAW execution, hashtag Wise Man no more. Clips flooded Twitter, TikTok, Instagram. Every reaction video started the same way. With open mouths, screams, and someone yelling what? Fans weren't just reacting. They were mourning an era and celebrating the beginning of a new one. Because in one night, Punk and Roman did what no storyline had done in years. They made wrestling feel dangerous again. Veterans and analysts didn't stay quiet. Booker T on his podcast, "This is the most real thing WWE has pulled off in years. This felt like a shoot." Eric Bischoff, "They just reset the board. Every rivalry looks irrelevant now." Even Triple H reportedly reacted backstage with a single sentence, "Let them burn it down." This wasn't just a plot twist. It was a creative earthquake. And it left no one standing. No name has been given. No stable has been announced. But if this is the beginning of a faction, it's not one fans will chant for. It's one they'll fear. No gimmicks. No matching gear. No corny group promos. Just two names. Roman Reigns. CM Punk. That's enough. That's more than enough. Because a faction is usually a group of wrestlers working together. This is two storms merging into a supercell. And the forecast is destruction. This is the question that has everyone pacing. Does the bloodline retaliate? Does Seth Rollins respond? Does Cody Rhodes get pulled in? Is Heyman done for good? We don't know. And that's why it works. For the first time in years, Raw ended with no clear path forward. No scripted next step. Just two figures walking out of the fire they started. Let's rewind everything, moment by moment. Not just to relive it, but to lock it into memory. Because this wasn't just another Monday Night Raw. This was a seismic reset. A moment that fans will be referencing a decade from now. This was the night Roman Reigns returned. The night CM Punk didn't just rebel, he allied. And the night Paul Heyman's entire empire was reduced to rubble. Not symbolically. Physically. The music hit. The arena popped like a live wire. Roman Reigns walked out, not as the tribal chief of old, but as something colder. More focused. Not dressed for ceremony. Dressed for war. The crowd barely had time to process it before CM Punk appeared. Not on the ramp. Not with fireworks. Out of the shadows. From the crowd. Silent. Inevitable. Together, they walked to the ring. No words. No poses. No signs of nostalgia. Just shared purpose. And ahead of them? Paul Heyman, surrounded by the faction he built, piece by piece, while Roman was away. That faction was dismantled with clinical precision. JD Riot folded first. Marcus Vane went down in a heavyweight clash that ended fast and ugly. Kai Silva was twisted into unconsciousness. Malachi Rise tried the aerial route and was intercepted like a fly swatted from midair. Every member fell. And Heyman? He fell without a strike. He collapsed into a plea. No mercy. No response. Roman and Punk turned their backs and walked away. The silence after said more than 1,000 promos could have. No declarations. No branding. Just devastation. Let's talk about what that means. For over a decade, Paul Heyman has been the most manipulative mind in WWE. The mouthpiece of monsters. The architect behind reigns, factions, and betrayals. He survived Lesnar. He manipulated the bloodline. He assembled a second generation of warriors in Roman's absence. But power, in Heyman's hands, is always temporary. Because the men he molds eventually outgrow the voice whispering in their ears. Last night was that moment. Heyman didn't get kicked out of power. He got erased from it. Reigns didn't punish him. He ignored him. Which is worse? Because punishment means relevance. Silence means the game moved on without you. Heyman was reduced to what he's always feared being, irrelevant. Roman Reigns isn't part of the bloodline. CM Punk isn't trying to climb the mountain again. They're not aligned because of shared goals. They're aligned because they both know what it feels like to be used, misrepresented, and underestimated by the system they helped build. This isn't a faction. This is a partnership that exists outside the typical WWE machinery. It's not a heel turn. It's not a face pop. It's an invasion. Quiet. Controlled. Dangerous. Because it didn't start with a speech. It started with a strike. If you look at the metrics, this segment is already breaking records. The replay was the most viewed clip on WWE's YouTube within 2 hours. Social media engagement exploded. Reactions weren't split. They were united in disbelief. Even longtime critics and lapsed fans were saying the same thing. I haven't felt this way since The Shield debuted. This wasn't scripted. It was real. WWE just reminded us what it can be. And maybe that's the real story. Not just the destruction of Heyman's faction. But the rebirth of unpredictability. The reminder that anything really can happen. And when it does, it hits harder than ever. WWE has a clean slate in front of them, and they know it. The natural questions are flying. Will Roman and Punk stay on Raw, or cross over to SmackDown? Is the bloodline dead? Or waiting? Could this alliance implode just as fast as it formed? Who dares challenge them? Because here's the truth. Roman and Punk aren't champions right now. They don't need to be. This isn't about gold. This is about burning the whole system down and seeing what rises from the ashes. They're not fighting for belts. They're fighting to control the game board. That's scarier. Championships can be won and lost. But when two legends control the narrative, everyone else is just trying to survive it. Every wrestling fan remembers their where were you moments. The night Austin turned heel. The pipe bomb. The Shield's debut. This was one of those moments. And it didn't need shock value. It didn't rely on backstage brawls or glass breaking or celebrity cameos. It relied on two truths walking side by side. Roman Reigns, CM Punk, and the void they left behind after they walked away. Now it's your turn. What did you think? Is this the greatest return in modern wrestling? Is this the beginning of a new era? What makes this moment different from other shocking alliances in WWE history is that it doesn't feel like a gimmick or a forced angle. It feels like a threat. A permanent shift in tone and power. Roman Reigns and CM Punk didn't join forces to entertain. They didn't smile for the camera. They didn't even speak. Because they didn't need to. The destruction spoke for them. This is a warning to everyone watching, in the locker room, in the boardrooms, and at home, that the game has changed. And the worst part? No one knows what the rules are anymore. What's also terrifying is how calm it all was. Reigns didn't storm the ring in rage. Punk didn't explode in his usual fury. There was no yelling, no chaos. They moved like soldiers on a mission. Each strike was deliberate. Each decision coordinated. That tells you this wasn't a heat-of-the-moment ambush. This had been planned. For weeks. Maybe months. Every target had their role. Every move had its place. Even the silence served a purpose. It didn't need flash. It didn't need a 5-minute promo. It only needed impact. That's what makes it scarier than any run-in or pipe bomb promo. This wasn't a story beat. This was a reset switch. WWE fans are used to betrayal. Tag teams turning on each other. Factions imploding. Surprise attacks from former allies. That wasn't this. Reigns didn't betray Heyman. Punk didn't betray expectations. They corrected a lie that had grown too large. Heyman had presented himself as the brain behind every great reign. Lesnar. Reigns. His latest faction. He positioned himself as the nucleus of power in WWE. But in the end, the power never belonged to him. It belonged to the men who carried the fight. And when they returned, they reclaimed what was always theirs, not with words, but with action. There's something poetic in how different and yet compatible Punk and Reigns have become. Punk is fire. Ideological. Explosive. He fights because he believes in something, even if that something is just himself. Reigns is ice. Strategic. Composed. He fights because he knows he can win. Because he controls time in the ring. He doesn't rush. He makes others react. Together, they don't cancel each other out. They sharpen one another. And when men like that move in tandem, the result isn't a tag team. It's a movement. That's what we saw at Raw, not two men reuniting for nostalgia, but two systems aligning for dominance. What's even more compelling is that there was no promo between them. No pre-match hype. No post-match hug or stare down. They didn't even look at each other much. And yet, every motion said the same thing: we know. We know what was taken from us. We know who did it. We know what to do about it. And they did it, without explanation. It's that unspoken understanding that sets this pairing apart from every other alliance in WWE history. No need to sell the audience on why. The destruction was the why. And the silence after was the how. WWE history is filled with moments that changed direction. The Shield's debut. Punk's pipe bomb. Austin refusing to submit. Becky becoming the man. But none of those moments combined so much history, symbolism, and current momentum into one 15-minute segment the way this one did. This wasn't just a callback. This was the next step forward. The echoes are there, yes. Roman walking with that same conviction he had as the Shield's spearhead, but with more precision. Punk standing in defiance, not of a system, but beside another who had also been used by it. But this was new. It felt like the evolution of all those previous revolutions. This wasn't the start of a rebellion. This was the start of rule. Perhaps the biggest outcome of the night isn't the destruction of Heyman's faction or the shock value of Punk and Roman's partnership. It's uncertainty. No one knows what this is leading to. There's no WrestleMania match teased. No championship target declared. No next victim circled. And that's what makes it electric. Every fan, every superstar, every producer is now asking the same questions. Will Roman challenge for the Universal Championship again? Will Punk finally finish the story he started a decade ago? Are they hunting titles, or are they hunting people? Is this alliance a long game, or a ticking time bomb? Because it will explode. We all know it. The only question is when. And who gets caught in the crossfire? The most powerful image of the night wasn't the beatdown. It wasn't the spear. It wasn't the GTS. It was Heyman. On his knees. Mouth open. Hands together. Looking up like he was trying to stop a storm with a prayer. And Roman turning his back on him. Not out of hatred. Not even pity. Just indifference. That was the death knell. Not the violence. The apathy. And in WWE, indifference from a monster like Roman is worse than hate. It means you no longer matter. So here's where we stand. Heyman is broken. His faction is gone. Raw has no ruling power structure. And two of the most explosive figures in the business are walking through the wreckage, not to restore order, but to see what else they can break. No titles were exchanged. No contracts signed. But a message was delivered. And whether you're a fan, a wrestler, or an executive in that company, you got it loud and clear. Roman Reigns is back. CM Punk isn't alone. And WWE? WWE has just been put on notice. What happened on Raw wasn't built to sell a match next week. It wasn't designed to set up a contract signing or a segment on Miz TV. It wasn't a teaser. It was a shift in the gravitational pull of WWE. That's why it's still being talked about, not just by fans, but by industry veterans, analysts, and even locker room insiders. Because for once, it didn't feel like someone reading lines. It felt like someone drawing a line in the dirt and daring anyone to cross it. Roman and Punk didn't just dominate. They disconnected the narrative from the system. They broke the fourth wall without speaking. They didn't say, "We're taking over." They just did it. And everyone, from Cody to Rollins to Triple H himself, felt the floor tilt beneath them. Paul Heyman was the bridge between the old dynasty and whatever came next. He tried to create a bloodline successor group. Tried to play puppeteer again. But he forgot one thing: you can't replace gods with actors. The men he selected were good. But they weren't Roman. They weren't even close. And now that they've been erased, there's a vacuum at the top of Raw. No more wise man behind the curtain. No more hand-picked successors. No more peacekeeping authority figures. Just open space, and two predators standing in it. Roman doesn't need to be champion to be king. Punk doesn't need to be liked to be dangerous. What they need, what they now have, is leverage. And in WWE, that's more powerful than any belt. There's a reason the crowd didn't erupt with chants after the beatdown. They were stunned. Silent. Watching like they were witnessing something real, something unscripted, unplanned. Because at a gut level, fans understood what just happened. They knew this wasn't just a pop. This was a pivot. That kind of silence only happens when people are pulled all the way in. It's what happens when fiction cracks open and truth bleeds through. This wasn't about suspension of disbelief. This was about belief, period. Everyone believed it, because it was believable. And that's what makes this so rare. Usually after an ambush or alliance, the next step is clear. A promo. A tweet. A teaser. But Reigns and Punk left none of that. They gave us nothing, and in doing so, gave us everything. Because now, the silence is the story. That silence is where fear grows. Where anticipation simmers. Where chaos starts to ferment. They didn't explain their partnership. They didn't even justify the destruction. They just left. Which means we're all stuck waiting, wondering, when they'll show up next. Who they'll target. How long they'll let this silence breathe before they puncture it with violence again. Whatever the next premium live event is, doesn't matter. It already belongs to them. Even if they don't show up, their presence will be felt in every promo. In every match where a superstar keeps glancing at the ramp. In every segment where the locker room leader gets quiet before going out. They've turned every entrance into a possible ambush. Every main event into a warning sign. You can't script that kind of power. You can only unleash it. And that's what WWE did last night. Let's kill the nostalgia narrative. This wasn't the Shield returning. This wasn't Punk hugging the fans. This wasn't about anything that used to be. This was about what comes next. Roman didn't return to reclaim a throne. He returned to flip the table. Punk didn't ally with him out of friendship. He stood beside him because only Reigns understands what it's like to be betrayed after you've built the empire they now worship. There's no emotion in this alliance. Only purpose. That's the difference. And that's why it's unstoppable, until it collapses. And when that happens? It won't be quiet. Not because it's unscripted. Not because punches landed. But because for the first time in a long time, the audience didn't feel like spectators. They felt like witnesses. And now, they're waiting. Not for a twist. Not for a swerve. But for the next play. Because we're not watching a story anymore. We're watching a takeover. And everyone in the ring, on commentary, backstage, and watching from home knows, this isn't over. This hasn't even begun. In wrestling, even the wildest betrayals usually leave some kind of door open. Some future apology, redemption arc. Or long-term payoff. But what happened on Raw didn't just slam the door shut, it welded it closed. Roman Reigns isn't coming back to lead the bloodline again. He isn't coming back to explain himself. And CM Punk isn't in this to be a hero or a martyr. This isn't about going back to what was. This is about never letting it happen again. They didn't attack Paul Heyman's faction for heat. They did it because the entire structure he built represented the very thing both of them had spent their careers fighting, control without respect. And so they didn't ask for their place back. They took a hammer to the throne. And now, nobody's sitting comfortably. What's scary isn't what we saw in the ring. It's what's happening now. Right now. Behind the scenes. In the hallways. In creative meetings. In title picture discussions. Everyone, from mid-carders to main eventers, is suddenly second-guessing their path. You can't book a feud without asking, what if Roman and Punk crash it? You can't put a belt on someone without wondering, how long will they keep it? And you definitely can't start a new faction without first asking yourself, would they see this as a threat? That's the power of disruption. It doesn't just destroy what's in front of it. It changes what people dare to build next. For the next few weeks, every entrance will carry tension. Every stare down will feel loaded. Because when a system is cracked wide open, no one's sure what's safe anymore. Will Roman appear on SmackDown? Will Punk walk into NXT? Will both of them show up backstage at a PPV and pick a fight with someone just to prove they can? That's what they've done. They've made chaos predictable. Not in the anything can happen way, but in the you know it will happen, you just don't know when or where way. And that kind of dread? That's not storyline heat. That's narrative dominance. For years, power in WWE has meant holding gold. Being in the main event. Getting mic time and the closing segment. But not anymore. Roman and Punk didn't chase any of that. They didn't raise a title. Didn't demand one. Didn't even mention one. And yet, after 20 minutes of silent destruction, they became the most powerful figures on the roster. Because now, power isn't gold. It's unpredictability. It's fear. It's knowing that no matter what show you're booked on, no matter what match you're in, the two men who just ended Heyman's empire could decide that you're next. And there's nothing anyone can do to stop it. And that's a good thing. Because instability is when real moments are born. It's when we get reactions that aren't rehearsed. Chants that aren't manufactured. Storylines that have to adapt to what the crowd is doing, not the other way around. Roman and Punk didn't bring back nostalgia. They brought back danger. They reminded us that wrestling isn't supposed to feel comfortable. It's supposed to feel like someone just lit a fuse in the center of the arena and no one knows how long it is. We're watching with our hands half covering our faces now. Because every second, we're bracing for the next explosion. This wasn't the first chapter in a Roman versus Punk story. That's what makes this so different. They didn't turn on each other. They didn't even tease tension. They moved as one. Like generals who've already fought their own wars, and now see the enemy outside their gates is bigger than either of them. This wasn't the beginning of a rivalry. It was the beginning of a campaign. And it's aimed at anyone who mistook their silence for weakness. They came not to feud with each other, but to force everyone else into the same ring and ask, do you belong here? Smaller in the sense that all storylines now orbit one point, what will Roman and Punk do next? Bigger in the sense that nothing feels off limits anymore. Could they take over Raw and SmackDown simultaneously? Could they dethrone every champion without ever declaring a title match? Could they start calling out the front office? They've opened the floodgates. And now, creative teams, fan theories, and future cards will revolve around what they might want to wreck next. That's the mark of an effective disruption. When potential becomes scarier than action. And right now? Their potential is unlimited. The most deafening part of Raw wasn't the crowd reaction. It wasn't the finisher's landing. It wasn't even the microphone that Paul Heyman dropped when his knees buckled. It was what didn't happen. Roman didn't say, acknowledge me. Punk didn't say, I told you so. There were no final words. No exclamation marks. Because punctuation ends a sentence. Roman and Punk weren't ending something. They were starting something. And that silence, thick, loaded, intentional, was the opening paragraph. Let's talk about the camera shot. The one that locked in before the screen faded to black. Heyman alone on the canvas. Still on his knees. Shoulders shaking. Punk halfway up the ramp, walking slow, head down, fists still clenched like he wasn't done yet. Roman in the foreground, dead center. Not even looking back. Eyes forward. Like this wasn't a climax. It was just a checkpoint. That image won't be a footnote in Raw's history. It will be a reference point. A moment WWE will revisit again and again, because it didn't just shift momentum, it changed the stakes. This wasn't wrestling as spectacle. This was wrestling as consequence. Heyman spent his entire WWE tenure playing chess. He manipulated Lesnar's destruction into dominance. He weaponized Roman's legacy. He assembled warriors like parts of a machine, expecting each piece to serve the empire without malfunction. But control always has a cost. Because sooner or later, the pieces gain awareness. They start asking questions. Why am I not the one giving orders? Why does this man still speak for me? What happens when I stop listening? And when that happens, the whole board collapses. Heyman always thought he was 10 moves ahead. But the truth was, he'd been playing the wrong game. Roman and Punk didn't bring a new strategy. They flipped the board, burned the rulebook, and walked away before the pieces stopped falling. Forget titles. Forget weekly rankings. Forget faction-building formulas. What Raw showed us was that the old model doesn't apply anymore. You can't manage chaos with bullet points. You can't plan out supremacy when someone like Roman Reigns walks back in and decides structure is irrelevant. The Heyman faction was built like a business. But Reigns and Punk? They came in like a virus. No warning. No pattern. No negotiation. They didn't challenge the system. They infected it. And now the whole machine is glitching. Commentary doesn't know how to sell it. The roster doesn't know how to respond. And the audience? They don't want it explained. They want more of it. Let's kill the myth that this was a finale. It wasn't. This wasn't the last gasp of Roman's dominance. It wasn't the redemption of CM Punk. This was the cremation of a story WWE had been trying to keep alive, one where Heyman still held the strings, where second-generation factions ruled Raw, where everything followed a set rhythm. Roman and Punk didn't just deviate from that script. They destroyed it. They looked at the WWE landscape, saw a hierarchy built on old grudges and safe rivalries, and decided none of it deserved to stand. So they didn't feud with it. They erased it. That's what made it different. That's what made it final. The rest of the roster? They're still running plays from last week's playbook. Still cutting promos about title shots and grudges that, now, feel irrelevant. Because the goalposts have moved. Roman and Punk don't care about feuds. They care about control. And anyone who gets in the way, whether they're in the main event or on main event, is vulnerable. No one is off limits. Veterans. Rookies. Tag teams. Authority figures. This isn't about revenge. It's about dominance without debate. And that's what makes it unstoppable. Because there's nothing to argue with. Nothing to negotiate. Nothing to reason with. You either move or get removed. Do you believe Roman and Punk can coexist long enough to reshape WWE forever? Or is this just the calm before a bigger, even more chaotic storm? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Like the video if you felt that chill run down your spine. Subscribe, because this isn't over. Not by a long shot. We're watching history unfold in real time. And you're not going to want to miss what comes next.